My name is Joanna Moser. I'm a Vice President of Product Management here at Medallia, and I'm so fortunate to be joined by this accomplished and dynamic panel to talk about text analytics. So this is just the means through which we derive organization and action from all of the unstructured data that comes in from your customers and employees. And we're really going to spend the next 45 minutes talking about how text analytics, or TA as we might mention it, is really an integral part of an enterprise experience program. So I'm going to have our panel go through and introduce themselves, and if you guys could share a little bit about yourself, about your program and kind of who owns it within the organization.
Hi everyone, I am Shira Whatley and I work at IHG Hotels and Resorts, and we have 20 brands and over 6,000 properties worldwide, and so we have over 4 million survey returns each year. So we do have a lot of feedback in that sense. We've worked with Medallia for over 10 years, and they gather all of our post-stay feedback surveys along with our IHG online guest reviews and our social feedback from like google.com, Booking, and all of that. Our primary metric for success would be our overall satisfaction score, which we actually call our guest love score. And so we look at that at a top 3 box. In addition to that, we also look at some of our key driver metrics within the survey. So things like our overall satisfaction with arrival, service, room, and F&B. And our team actually owns the program and, in charge of all of the hierarchy with the survey and all of the native reporting and things like that, and really seen as the subject matter experts of the Medallia program.
Yeah, this will be interesting. Well, I'll come back to you in a minute to talk about kind of managing, having kind of KPIs across the customer journey when it comes to doing these analyses. James, let's go to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm James Osanyinbi, manager of CX Analytics at Floor & Decor. We're a specialty retail flooring company. We have about 250 stores in the United States, and we specialize, like I said, in hard surface flooring. Our program is really divided between digital and retail for our stores. And we've been with Medallia for about 3 years on the store retail side. And then for the digital program, we've been with them for about 5 years. We focus primarily on NPS. Our Net Promoter Score is very important to us. We're a project-based company, so you coming in to either renovate your home or you may be a contractor who's doing work for several other clients. So we really pride ourselves on the customer engagement experience. So we also look at things like being greeted, being assisted, recommending installation materials for you, and are we asking the right project questions? So those are some of the key drivers that we have along with NPS, and we're really focused on our measures of success, looking at it very holistically from the moment the customer enters the door, how are we greeting them, how are we assisting them, and what's their overall experience with our brand.
Love it.
That's great. And Matt, we'll go to you.
Hi, everybody. Matt Schweikert. I am the Enterprise Experience Platform owner at MetLife. When I tell people that I work for MetLife, most of them follow it up by asking me if I can get Taylor Swift tickets at MetLife Stadium. I'm going to save everybody a little bit of time and tell you no, but maybe next year. I'm in a unique position in the sense that I don't actually own a program. I sit within global marketing and communications, and I consult with, advise, and ultimately empower our VOC program leads across the entire enterprise. So the cool thing about this gig is I get to work with programs that are literally just starting out in their infantile stages, and programs that have, matured over a 3 to 5 year time span. So a nice healthy balance of programs there. We historically have been pretty focused on Net Promoter Score, both at the transactional and the relationship level. We are starting to branch out, build in things like CSAT, OSAT, customer effort score, and then focusing a lot on digital health. So bringing DXA into the equation and trying to build that digital experience score into a lot of our success metrics as well.
With so many different stakeholders across the business, how do you help guide those stakeholders to the right metrics to use, the right elements of text analytics to use when you're helping answer questions and dig into different use cases?
So not taking a one-size-fits-all approach certainly helps. And then basically interrogating the stakeholders for hours and hours on end. Trying to learn as much about their line of business, their goals, right? What are you looking to get out of your program? Please don't come to me with everybody has a survey, so we have to as well answer. What kind of insights you're trying to glean? Are you bringing a hypothesis to the table that you're trying to challenge or validate? And then, ultimately tailoring the approach to that particular line of business. I'm also a huge proponent of the crawl, walk, run approach. I love connecting the green program leads with the more mature program leads to share best practices, do's and don'ts. And I've been trying to foster a lot of that cross-functional harmony since I stepped into this role. It's going pretty well.
Can you share a little bit more about the kind of crawl, walk, run, different levels of maturity from a text analytics perspective?
Yeah, certainly. So, I've had program leads or lines of business come to the table and wanting to launch 6 or 7 different surveys at once. And they're brand new to VOC and they're brand new to Medallia. Yeah. Maybe that's not the best approach right out of the gate, right? Maybe let's pick the most high impact touch point and focus on that for now, just to get a feel for the volume of feedback that we're going to come in. Obviously, volume, a huge dependency in the text analytics realm. You need a healthy amount of volume to really reap the benefits of TA. I will also say, and I'm staring at a former partner in crime of mine, Darren Hoffman. We launched the VOC program at Coldwell Banker. So we know what it's like to have little to no volume starting out. Spend time with your responses. Go through your responses at an individual level. For me, I think it's the least you can do. This is a customer that's taken time out of their day to share something with you. So, what does it take? All of 10 or 20 seconds to look at the response at an individual level? So even if you're not able to reap the true benefits of TA, go through each response and you will find nuggets of gold, I promise you.
Oh, that's great, getting to know your customer through their voice and through kind of reading that feedback. So Shira, I wanted to go back to you for a second, talking about having those different KPIs and organization of your text analytics against the customer journey. Can you share a bit with that about how you help stakeholders identify the right thing to focus on?
Yeah, so a lot of it, you just have to try to see where the scores are the lowest, because that's kind of where you need to focus and making sure that volume's there as well. And when we're looking at that, making sure that when you're trending the data, you're specifically looking at the year-over-year trends, because within the hospitality industry, seasonality is a big thing, and you can, wrongly predict things if you're just looking at it on a month-to-month basis. And so really we use that in conjunction with our text analytics. So our text analytics hierarchy kind of follows our questions within the survey. And so if you use the scores to try to find that area to focus on, then you can use the text analytics to really dig down and try to see where those specific problems are. And you just use that as a piece of the puzzle to try to figure out what you need to improve.
And James, when we were preparing for this, you mentioned a wonderful problem that you have, which is that you have these nice high net promoter scores, and kind of talking about using other types of metrics like sentiment to kind of help drive the analysis when you have scores that are very high, or perhaps even scores that don't change that much over time. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yes, of course. And I wanted to mention that our program sits under operations. So a lot of things that we're working on, we're really driving action for projects that are happening in the stores. So for us, our net promoter score is really healthy. So what I wanted to focus on with the reporting is focusing on net sentiment score. And the way I explained it to our stakeholders is that it operates similar to NPS. It's a 201-point scale. If all the customers have negative feedback about a particular topic, then the score is negative 100. If everyone's satisfied, it's 100. And then it's 50 if you're somewhere in the middle. So we focus on net sentiment score, but what we really do is behind the scenes, I'm using impact score to identify where the top and bottom topics based on that impact score. So that helps us with understanding that there's enough frequency of comments, then also understand the intensity of the emotion, whether it be positive or negative, but I'm showing net sentiment so that they know, as Shira said, over time, how we're improving. So for all the customers as well, because it's really important, because in the beginning, we wanted to focus only on detractors, but we said we need to pull back because you can have a particular topic like delivery, for instance, and you can have promoters who have friction points with that. But if you're segmenting only to detractors, you're not capturing that. So instead of using a web NPS or topic NPS, we're using that net sentiment score, and we're tracking it month to month, and we're also looking at year over year to enable people to understand, even if it's scored very high, you can still have this room to grow. And even if it's a negative topic, something that's a friction point, it may never be positive, but what we're looking for is gains year over year. We're looking for that improvement.
Yeah, I really like that, looking at change instead of static metrics. And I'm looking at that. Did you have something to?
Oh no, I'm agreeing. Yeah, I love it.
Excellent. And so James, you had mentioned the impact calculation as well. Just for folks, just for quick awareness, that's a prioritization metric that looks at kind of volume and the way that the score looks at to identify for a given element of text analytics, how much is it pulling down or pushing up your overall metric. And so what I'd like to do is talk about socialization. So how we kind of get this information out into the business. So Matt, I'm going to start with you. Can you talk a bit about how you share information out and also how you make it meaningful to individual stakeholders?
Yeah, so we are democratizing a ton of CX, VOC, and Medallia related data via enterprise dashboards, making sure that we're bringing both those top level metrics into dashboards, but also comments, right? And impact scores and things like that. I'm trying to encourage everyone within the organization to hound me about Medallia access. Again, going back to spending time getting to know your customers. We've made a lot of strides in role-based access, so folks don't have to sort through a bunch of noise to get to what's relevant to them, and trying to just make it as easy as possible to digest the data that's relevant to them. I do, even though I don't own a program, we have taken an agile approach to marketing over the last 2 years, so we've got about a dozen or so agile marketing pods within our marketing organization, have very specific high impact goals that align with our lines of business. So I do often support those pods in a customer insights capacity where they'll come to me with a hypothesis and then I get to totally geek out and dive into Medallia and pull a ton of relevant data. I like to start at a high level, so think top level metrics like an NPS or a CSAT or OSAT, and then I start to go down my little customer data funnel. I use impact scores. I look at things like net sentiment. It's incredibly impactful when you can come to a stakeholder and say, out of this pool of 5,000 responses, 75% are negative pertaining to this topic. Yeah. And really serves as that spark to get folks interested in digging more. And then I just love cherry picking verbatims and putting them in front of stakeholders and leaders, the literal voice of the customer, as I like to say. It's incredibly powerful and it seems to be working for us.
That's great. Any recommendations for presentation or things that work in addition to kind of cherry picking those relevant verbatims?
Yeah, I've got a marketing creative background, so I can build a deck. We all love our decks, but jazz it up, right? Try to really bring the storytelling element into the mix. I know we talked about this during our dry runs, but my little exercise in empathy at the end, the cherry on top, we are big power users of DXA, so I love highlighting session replays, right? That really highlight the problem, the area of friction, the area of opportunity. It's as close to looking over the shoulder of our customers as we're going to get. And I've witnessed stakeholders and leaders in real time click when they see that session replay, when they see that customer verbatim. Okay, now I get it. We have to do something about this.
Tying the aggregate data to a very tangible, real example of where that experience did or didn't work for a given customer.
Totally.
Yeah. James, I'm going to pass it to you. Same question.
Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out to Kara Brooks, our Senior Program Manager of CX. One of the things we introduced this year is Medallia Voice. So we never really report our text analytics in isolation. We typically have our NPS score associated with it, and we're using things like Medallia Voice to kind of show video examples of the feedback as well. It kind of brings it to life. Another thing that we do is look at related themes. So as you all know that for every topic, you have themes that are related. So if we're looking at a thing like delivery, that maybe that's a topic at level 2, you may have a theme that related to wait time, related to quality or condition of the product. So we also want to show those scores for the themes as well, for them to be able to drill down, really understand what are the key drivers of the experience the customer's having related to that topic. And then from there, we're also looking again at impact score is what we use to rank, but we're looking at that change in net sentiment score, and we're pulling verbatims as well. And for some of that, I am experimenting with AI using Copilot, which helps me to take the verbatims and kind of drill them down to understand what are the central themes and story along with that. So we are sharing some of that as well. And we're looking forward to features in Medallia that are upcoming, like Ask Athena, where we can kind of incorporate some of that root cause analysis as well. That's on the roadmap. But for right now, we're really focused on telling the story, looking at the year over year, having the topic, and then understanding what are the related themes associated with the topic.
James, how do you think about tailoring the outputs when you have different types of users or roles? So I know you said you have about 250 stores, thinking about talking to a store manager, a store owner versus somebody where you're looking across multiple stores.
When we think about store managers, one thing we have an issue with is sometimes volume. So they may be getting 30 or 40 surveys a month, whereas if we look at the entire chain, we may have a couple thousand a month. So for stores, we want to emphasize the customer experience and motivating our associates. So things like employee call out are probably going to be some of the things I've mentioned first. So if an associate's named in a positive way, that's a topic that we have. And then we have a field or we have a view in Medallia on the dashboard where they can look at that. So I'll just share the information with them. If we're thinking about our field leaders, someone at the district or region level, we're going to look at all of the topics they have that have at least 50 or more responses. And I'm going to show the net sentiment score and then the year over year. So some of the work I do is in Power BI. And so I'm using some of the Medallia data and connecting that to some of our customer data so that we can segment it as well. One of our big core parts of our business is working with contractors, our pros. And so I'm also able to segment our customers who take the survey and look at only those pro customers to see what is unique business case for those folks. So we're also segmenting that way as well.
Yeah, that's great, really thinking about the kind of combination of that structured and unstructured data to really tailor the kind of outputs to those key business segments to make sure that we're keeping things relevant for the business based on our different business goals. So Shira, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, so I work a lot with our brand teams, and a lot of it's just truly understanding what their business need is. And so what they come, their question that they come to you with might be fairly narrow, so you just kind of have to think outside the box of what other elements you can kind of bring in to really make it a more rich presentation or data analysis. And so with doing that, kind of all the things that you guys were saying, making sure that you include good data. So whether it's, different scores, the sentiment analysis, the impact scores. And then we also try to connect the dots using our consumer insights. So we don't just have our, guest feedback from the surveys, but also the research-based analytics of just the hospitality industry as a whole. And that kind of just helps connect the dots to give a bigger picture for those stakeholders. So it's not just real time, but also, future-based presentation of what they can do. And then we also do different segmentations, whether it's by brand. We do a lot of breakdown by like age and, different demographics, because that's really important when you're trying to tailor what you're doing and how to address certain age groups and everything like that. So.
Can you share a little bit more about you were talking about some of the broader research that you have about hospitality and about the business and how that helps drive some of the work that you do in text analytics and within Medallia?
So, a lot of things we've been working on, lately is age-based things. Because a lot of times, within the hospitality industry, the ones that are utilizing our services are changing. So we kind of have to make sure that we're adapting our business to that true next-gen customer. And so it's just using all of the information that they have to meet the needs, whether it's increasing digital or just how people interact with you. Because people, depending on how old you are, changes how you want the service to be delivered to you. And so just understanding all those.
Yeah.
Very true.
So I want to talk about maintenance a little bit. Maybe a non-sexy topic, but an important one when we talk about kind of enterprise program management. So James, I'll start with you. How do you think about balancing kind of program maintenance, especially with something like text analytics and the different hierarchies, with the kind of needs and requests from your stakeholders?
So one of the things we did this year was very monumental was a text analytics audit. So when we started 3 years ago on the retail side, post-transaction with the stores, we kind of took the out-the-box approach, and then we created some net new topics around some friction points that we had. But I didn't really have a good sense of our tag rate. I didn't know what we were doing with the untagged analysis and those comments, and if there were some missed opportunities. So we took a few months, we looked at our tag rate, it was very healthy, above 80%, but there were still some opportunities to refine all the rules. So we really had a Medallia consultant come in, Connie, she was amazing. And she took each rule and each topic and we went through line by line and refined those. And that helped us improve our tag rate. And then we also looked at opportunities to create some net new topics. One of the ones that we created that we still are gonna be utilizing more this year is a topic around likelihood to recommend. So if someone says something specific about what they love about the brand, that's now a topic. So one of the opportunities that we did try that didn't work as well was product mentions. So that was one where if they're saying tile or wood or stone, then it gets flagged. The issue there, they weren't specific enough, so the customer was kind of flagging too many things. So what we're gonna do is tie that more on the back end to our department level, SKU level purchase data. So we're really taking a step back with this audit, and we were able to kind of see where we stand. We're in pretty healthy shape with our topic set now, but when we create net new surveys, then we're gonna have to kind of take another look at it and figure out some new topics and maybe go through the process again once we get those new topic sets. But it's pretty much, I want to do at least once a year where we take a look at what's our tag rate. And one of the things that we also adopted this year is what's called the topic coverage dashboard. And so that's something you can add in the feature in Medallia where it's going to tell you what your tag rate is. It's going to show you those untagged comments. You could export that and do some analysis with it. As Matt said, you could read line by line and really understand it. And then, as Shira was saying, connecting it to demographic data will be powerful as well. So those are some of the things we're currently thinking about.
It ties back, Matt, to what you were saying about this kind of crawl, walk, run, kind of starting and continuing to iterate and improve. What impact do you see of having these kind of regular reviews and kind of this maintenance process throughout your programs?
So I use it as an opportunity to re-engage business leaders and stakeholders. They tend to, not in every case, but in most cases, know their customers better than anybody. Yep. So bringing business leaders and stakeholders in to review topic sets that we're currently working with, thinking about what they'd like to add, what they might like to take away. And I've seen it really get them re-energized about the work that we're doing in CX, in VOC. So taking that, rather unsexy work and trying to flip it a little bit, make it into a positive.
It does, and I think it gives the stakeholders a stake in the outputs and in the program when you solicit that feedback, that input regularly, so that they have a voice. If there's something that's really important, top of mind in terms of their business goals, they have a place where they can have that built in and added in.
Totally. I don't want to be creating all of the surveys that we send out by myself.
I mean, you don't know every single question that every person in your business wants to answer.
I'm getting there.
Comes with time. And Shira, a question for you when it comes to this topic of maintenance. How do you balance program maintenance with kind of evolution and innovation?
Right now, we've recently changed our survey. So from a maintenance standpoint, as we make changes, making sure that it doesn't have any kind of negative impact. So we kind of changed some of our questions around and where, our open-ended question was, and making sure that our abandonment rates don't increase. So little things like that, you just really need to keep an eye on. And then kind of like we did the topic analysis about a year ago and updated all the rules. And we took away some of our bias in our questions. So before we had multiple open-ended questions, so we kind of changed the wording of that so our text analytics were a little bit more rich. The other thing that we're going to start probably doing is adding texting and app feedback into. And so changing that so it probably even like a different hierarchy. Right now we have one hierarchy that everything feeds into. And so probably trying to adapt that if we bring in different channels so it actually flows and can answer some different questions. I know ours are more topic based and yours are a little bit different in that sense. So
I want to dig in. I'm interested for any or all of you. Something that you said, Shira, about kind of the relationship between text analytics and your survey program in terms of making adjustments one way or another. This is a topic that came up yesterday in the Medallia user group session. And so I was interested if James or Matt, if you guys have had any changes to your surveys or any of your programs based on things that you've seen in text analytics.
So I've gone through an exercise with one of our more mature programs in the group benefits space to cut down the amount of questions we are asking on our digital surveys before we get to the open-ended field. A lot of my stakeholders have mentioned that, the open-ended, that the comment is the most important for them. Yeah. So let's not ask 15 questions then before we get to that point. Increase our chances of abandonment and whatnot. So that's been a huge help there too. Also, on the omnichannel front, right? As we bring more data sources into the mix, thinking, okay, do we really need to ask this question if we're able to learn this from DXA or from a call center transcript or something like that, right? I think that the more we can do to reduce will only increase our completion rates and give us better and meatier data to work with.
And for us, one of the things we focused on is that we have a lot of the answers already. We're just not mining the data correctly sometimes. So one of the things that we focused on, we have item not found is something that that's important to our business. Did you come in? Were you able to find everything to complete your project? And we have an open-ended section that says, please specify what you could not find. So within there's a lot of plethora of information about how we can better help the customer. So I'm doing like a yearly analysis of that to understand what the trends within that specific question. Someone says yes, no, then also like what type of customer they are as well. So when we have new surveys, we're really conscious of what can we already mine from our existing questions before we build out and ask the customer, were you able to navigate here, were you able to navigate there, things like that. Because a lot of those topics are within the text analytics. If you build the right rules in the open-ended section, you can get a lot of that information, and then you can have a net sentiment score that can tell you how well you're performing instead of having to make the survey longer. So we're being really conscious about the questions we have and then making sure if we ask a question, do we have analysis that backs that up to show the business the value of what the customer is saying?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, every time you reach out to the customer, you're asking for their time. And so I think that this kind of more modern way of thinking about how do we engage with customers, you're talking about conversational data, going into SMS, looking at what we have on the website via DXA, and then tying it in with all of the information we already have. It means that we can be a lot smarter and leaner in the way that we ask customers to give us feedback.
Totally.
So with that, I know, Shira, you already started talking about this. I'm interested in everybody in terms of like, what's next? How are you thinking about evolving your programs? I mean, the world, technology, our businesses, our customer needs are changing, I think, faster now than they have been. Yeah. So how are you thinking about evolving your program, and how is text analytics going to evolve along with it?
So first and foremost, stressing the importance of the omnichannel view. For programs who are currently capturing an omnichannel view of customer feedback, working with Johan and Scott back there on bringing something like TX profiles into the mix to give folks a one-stop shop without having to jump from solution to solution to solution. For programs or LOBs that might not have that omnichannel view and are still solely relying on digital surveys, sitting down and having the conversation. Okay, what else can we bring into the mix? Speech analytics from contact centers, is DXA live on your site or your portion of the broader site? If not, well, why don't we explore implementing it? That's huge for us. I would say number one, and probably where I spend the bulk of my time, focus on the omnichannel approach.
Yep, bringing it all together.
Yes.
And I think the thing that's nice about text analytics is when you have all of these different sets of data that don't necessarily have a common data element to them, you can use the text component to get that omnichannel view of those different types of data.
Yes.
We're really focused right now on the retail side with the stores, and we have the digital. We're going to eventually be working with customer care to bring that data in. And then we want to know if it's one customer who's been to a store, been to the website, called customer care, what is the experience like for one or two specific topics? And then we look at the store level, the division level, wherever, district level. How are we performing on these different topics across the multiple channels? And how are we performing over time across channels? So we're working with Medallia to kind of start to bring in some of that omni-channel experience data.
Mm-hmm. And I know you talked about the conversational piece, but anything else that you would add in from an evolution perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we're really trying to look at that end-to-end journey. And so right now we're looking at, the post-stay feedback, which really gives you insights that are good, but they're past insights. And so trying to really bring in that data to really have our front desk have those things that are valuable. So if someone comes in and they want extra towels, that front desk knows ahead of time and they can address that. They can predict the needs, and really trying to capture the data that may come from the app talking directly to the front desk to have that go through. So we can really utilize some predictive analytics and other things for guests just to make their overall stay better.
For our closing questions, I just want to know if you guys can share your a recommendation for folks who are whatever stage of the journey they're in with text analytics in their program, just biggest tip for driving kind of engagement and, what was the word I was thinking? But engagement and stickiness and adoption of their programs.
So engagement at like the customer level?
For your users.
For users, okay, because just on the customer, just since I brought it up, socialize the changes that you make based on the feedback that you get. If I spend time filling out 5 or 6 surveys a year with the brand that I frequent, and that brand doesn't actually tell me that they're doing anything with that feedback, I'm probably gonna spend less time on those surveys the following year. So first and foremost, socialize. When it comes to internal user engagement, Scott, aligning CX goals to business goals and objectives, first and foremost, right? Making sure that they have a lot of skin in the game, and then coming back and trying to showcase that ROI, or what the improvement in some of those top level CX metrics means for their business. Really making it about them, getting to the what's in it for me has proven successful for me over the years.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Socialize, socialize, socialize.
Yes, put your marketing hats on.
Yes.
Yeah.
James.
And for us, it's show the relevant metrics to your stakeholders. So for example, marketing is a department we work with. When we talk about things like brand value, our price, our selection, we have topics that relate directly to that. We have CSAT scores that relate to that. So if I'm meeting with them on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, if I'm meeting with the executives that are on our board, I want to show how those measures are doing. Then also when we have projects that are closely related to our topics, I want to show what those topic scores are 3 months prior to when the project started, in the middle of the project, and then at the end of the project to see, do we have any growth, and can we attribute some of that to the changes we made as a business?
Yeah, I love that. Relevancy and timeliness to key business goals and initiatives.
Exactly.
All right. So since you guys kind of talked, some things I was going to say, so I'll do it a little bit more specific, that I think that really evaluating your topic hierarchy. I think that is important. If that's not something that you have done recently, to make sure that you go through and do the formal process with Medallia, or even just look at those themes. And if there's certain, things that are popping up, maybe you might need a topic for that. And make sure that your rules make sense, that you adjust the rules to truly be the way that the people are speaking. You really have to read the comments to make sure the rules make sense. And I think making sure that they match what your stakeholders are needing as well. And so just evaluating your topic hierarchy on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's important. The outputs of the reporting are going to be tied to that hierarchy. So making sure it's relevant to your business goals today versus the goals you had when you were first setting up the program is really important.
Okay, I have 2 separate questions that are unrelated.
All right.
So feel free to answer them separately. So I work for Bath & Body Works, and we are lucky where we have so many open-ended comments come in. And usually I'm looking at them like a monthly hindsight. Now, all the comments are filtered by time. I don't want to look at a single day. There could be 5,000 comments from one day. I want to look across the entire month. And I usually filter for negative if I'm looking for opportunities, or positive if I want to, give us a crumb. But I wish I could filter by most negative or theme within the topic to see the comments. And I don't know if that's an option. And then my other question is, so we have questions like metrics in our survey to get a quant score for ease of checkout. Now we have year-over-year trends. So our ease of checkout for stores is maybe getting better. We've seen improvement. And then you look at the text analytics and the sentiment is getting more negative. Or you specifically look at a specific response and they'll give us an ease of checkout score of 5. And then they tell us they waited in a really long line and it was really annoying. So how do you marry quant and qual when they're trending in a different way? Do you need to evaluate the text analytics? Maybe the quant isn't what you think you're asking, or they're answering it in a different way. But yeah, those are my 2 questions.
Great. I'll answer the first one very quickly. Yes, that's possible. Feel free to come up at the end and I can talk you through it. But for the second question, I'll pass it over to you guys.
One of the things I do is mentions per volume. So for example, we have a topic around product selection. I'll look at mentions per 1,000 comments. So that's something I'm building a little bit outside of Medallia and Power BI, but you can do that in Excel or whatever platform you have, so that I'm able to see Is the frequency increasing related to the other topics rather than just looking at the sheer volume? Because sometimes as you're improving a service, you're going to get less feedback about a topic because it may be related to something that's negative, but you're still improving in that topic because it's being mentioned less frequently. So the score is still going to be negative, but you're having the volume go down because it's less of a friction point. So you can also highlight that to your stakeholders as well, because some topics are typically always going to lean more toward the negative side just because people aren't going to talk about some things if they're great. They're only going to mention them if it's a negative experience. But then you can look at the volume and kind of relate that story to what you're seeing from like things like ease of effort.
Like regularly evaluating those questions that you're asking. And it seems like Bath & Body Works is doing a great job using customer effort score to measure the success of a checkout. But we used to include a net promoter question on literally every survey that we deployed. And yes, it's an important metric, but it just doesn't always have a place. If you're trying to measure a transaction, don't ask a relationship-based, metric there. So I think that's one. Second would be impact scores. Going back to your first question, I love impact scores. Team knows I love impact scores, and I think that they kind of help with that quant versus qual piece that you're looking to solve for.
Yeah, and I think something to keep in mind when you're looking at the quantitative versus the unstructured, especially with surveys, is that not every person who takes a survey is going to leave a comment. I think that's where the impact scores are helpful, which is when customers leave comments, are they pulling up or pulling down the score? Because that can be indicative of the folks who aren't leaving feedback or who aren't answering those questions. So it may be that, customers who have a good experience leave high scores and move on without saying anything, but when they have a bad experience, they're going to leave more information.
How's it going, panel? Tyler from Independence Blue Cross out of Philadelphia. Go Birds. I actually have a specific question for James. I know I'm picking on you, but you mentioned a topic around LTR, and that actually really piqued my interest. I'd love to know a little bit more about A, kind of how you built that, and B, how you're using that to impact your program in your organization and what it's being used for, because that's something I took a note on and will probably do.
Great question. So that was really an idea that came from Medallia during our text analytics audit. It's been a couple months, so our plans to use it are that when we have opportunities with marketing or other stakeholders that like to basically be able to have customer feedback that's really positive, we want to use that as examples of verbatims of positive experiences. So we haven't had a chance quite yet to start to socialize those comments, but we are getting some good traction on them. Sometimes they're a little vague, so what I like to do is, when text analytics are broken up, you have the entire comment, then you have the phrase that's tagged. So I'll go back and look at the entire comment and see if there's more within that to kind of explain why they gave us that score. So our plans are really to kind of socialize that more so with the marketing team and then eventually operations. But it's really meant to be able to give us a quick snapshot of, we have these great NPS scores. Here's a couple of reasons of why people are saying that we're a great brand.
Those types of topics can also be good opportunities for positive closed loop. Follow up with your customers who are above and beyond happy with the experience that they had. It could be a good way of looking at the positive as well as the kind of standard detractor type of follow-up.
That's a great point, because one of the things we do, we close the loop with our detractors, but we're looking at promoters and passives as well, even maybe some opportunities for follow-up surveys to really understand more about the experience, because often we focus on the negative or the friction points when those strengths are really what also going to give us more customers, better experience. So that's something we're looking at as well.
What strategies have you all seen with using text analytics to get operators more engaged with understanding how to use text analytics effectively at their level?
Bring them into the topic build out, right? Pick their brains, leverage them as the experts that they are, and have them build out your topic hierarchy.
I think sometimes it's showing them, just making sure that they know how to build a story so they can really dig in and see what impact it can have. And so, it's just socializing them with it so they know how to use it and just the benefits that there are, because, it's great. You really can build great stories from all the text analytics. And I think if they see those examples and they can see where, other stores maybe have made some changes, that can help. And just making sure that they understand how to use it, because sometimes it's scary if you don't know how to use a portal, you don't know how to do things. It's just, too much time. So just show them how easy it is.
Yeah, I love that. And I think incorporating into your kind of training or enablement material, not just like how to use it, but why to use it.
Yeah.
And having those examples and for you, like real life examples, right? When you're within your own business, you can share those examples of success. I think that really helps drive buy-in.
When you're a store and you're in a certain state, sometimes you only have visibility really into what's happening on your day-to-day, and you don't get visibility to your topic sets and topics that are mentioned maybe in other places in the company. So find ways to help share with them at a high level. One of the things we do is a quarterly newsletter where we're sharing at the chain level, what are the top and bottom topics, and that goes out to our store field leaders. So that's one way, and then also, again, help them to be comfortable with the information and how to access it in Medallia.
Well, we are at time. Thank you so much for joining. This was great.